You guys ready to go back in time? Well, a while back, I did some reviews of shows from the 1970s. For those not in the know, I think that the 1970s were the worst decade in animation history. Most cartoons back then were very cheaply made, as television animation wasn't profitable otherwise. Every cartoon from the 1970s was so close to Scooby-Doo that suing the makers of them for copyright infringement would be an open and shut case. If, it wasn't Hanna-Barbera making literally every single one of them. And then there were the celebrity-based cartoons. Ever since that marathon, I've wanted to give other decades their own little spotlight.
Hello, my name is Rubik.
And which one is better than everyone's favorite decade, the 90s? I feel like I'm treading on thin ice already, because in some circles, this decade is more or less a sacred cow. I mean, I get it. The 90s was a very important decade in the history of animation. It was when cartoons started becoming mainstream after the Dark Ages. We had shows like The Simpsons and Daria that appealed to older audiences. Disney had hit its renaissance with films like Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. Technology got better, leading us into our first CGI cartoons. It was truly an era of innovation and experimentation, and for the next couple of months, I'm probably going to be shitting all over it. Because that shiny era of perfection isn't the real story, or at the very least, it's not the whole story. 90s animation had some great accomplishments, but for every innovation, there were dozens of copycats, and for every successful experiment, there were hundreds of failures. Ren and Stimpy was one of the most influential shows of the 90s, and for good reason. It was a good show that pushed the boundaries with its own unique style, and was enjoyed by kids and adults alike. However, influenced isn't always a good thing, and some of the things most directly influenced by Ren and Stimpy are some of the worst cartoons I've ever seen. Ren and Stimpy influenced shows like Schnookums and Meat, Cow and Chicken, and Mega Babies. None of them really knowing what made the experiment successful. Schnookums and Meat was about as soulless as you'd expect a gross-out show made by Disney to be. Mega Babies just ramped up everything disgusting by 1,000. And Cow and Chicken had an episode full of lesbian stereotypes because you just gotta try to be adult. That's what we gotta do, right? Not to mention some of the worst episodes of SpongeBob, and what makes many of today's adult cartoons bad are Ren and Stimpy influences that don't know what they're doing. Then again, it's not hard to miss the mark of what Ren and Stimpy did right, since even its own spin-off screwed that up. Stressed Eric was an experiment to make a British humor sitcom for American audiences. Now, there's a reason that when many shows are imported to the United States, they're completely rewritten and remade. And that reason is that I hate every single second of this and everything that it stands for. But it's not as if there weren't solid trends in the 90s that needed to die a painful death. Like the totally too much attitude trends personified in both Quack Pack and Rocket Power. Today we're going to be talking about Hammerman, the quintessential stereotype of the 90s. Now, when I think of just randomly giving anything the kids might be remotely interested in a cartoon, I usually associate that with the 80s. The 80s is the decade that gave us a cartoon based on the Rubik's Cube. It's a good thing we don't make cartoons based on any random thing that crosses our mind today, right? I look forward to ripping you apart limb from limb later this year. Your mere existence is an insult to everyone who ever cared about animation in the slightest, and one of the biggest piles of contempt for the general movie-going public that I have ever seen. And I bait my breath, waiting for the catharsis of pulling apart every second of your waste of screen time. It is going to be enjoyable. I associate the 90s more with doing that for video games. And celebrity-based cartoons is something that I associate with the 70s. However, it actually seemed to be a fairly big trend in the 90s. And one of the worst trends of the 90s. Not the absolute worst, I think the rampant gross-out takes that cake. But this was a pretty big one in the early 90s. With the New Kids on the Block cartoon, Wish Kid, the Macaulay Culkin cartoon, Pro Stars, or the worst of them all, Hammerman. I've talked about this show before, or rather its theme song. It popped up on my worst theme songs of all time list. I had some very harsh words to say about it. It goes on for a minute too long with an anemic beat and useless lyrics that do not flow. The sad part is that the theme might be the best part about the show. One thing I want you to notice in particular is the animation. Here's what the animation looks like in the actual show.
Not bad, Ludwig.
Our first batch of Marmite Meister's malicious, multicolored, mayhem-making paint potion.
Well, if I can't have superpowers, I better have a super plan.
No, the video is not skipping. It's actually animated like this at 2 frames per second. I don't know why it looks like this, or who thought it would be a good idea. The intro must have been animated by a different company, because I could swear this show doesn't use in-betweens. And if you want to know why those are important, this is more or less what your animation looks like without in-betweens. Besides his songs, MC Hammer is famous for blowing through a fortune of $30 million and ending up about $18 million in debt. You'd think that he would have spent a little bit more of that making this animation, animate. I know what you're thinking. I review a lot of cartoons with bad or low quality animation, and the complaint is getting old. But it's actually a very important complaint here. The show is filled with dancing and things grooving to the beat. It begs to be animated fluidly and be energetic. You see it from the very first scene in the cartoon with everyone playing music. But let's see if the show finds a way to get around this painful problem. After a near goddamn minute and a half of the introduction, the show starts, with MC Hammer talking to some kids. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that the show is under the delusion that it was trying to be Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Like the intro, this goes on for far longer than it should. Another full minute. The show might be a half hour long, but stalling 2.5 minutes to get to it does not make a good first impression. Then again, everything about this intro gives off the worst impression possible, short of directly insulting the audience. It goes on spoiling not just the moral, like the kids are idiots and wouldn't be able to get that on their own, but it also goes on to spoil the whole goddamn plot. I complain, but that would have saved me like 20 whole minutes if I didn't have to watch the rest of this to review it. I get what they're trying to do, drop excitement for what's going to happen, but it just doesn't work. It ends up redundant at best, and I'm not going to waste any more time on it. We start, and as mentioned prior, 5 seconds in and the animation is already annoying me. A guy named Ludwig is playing a keyboard guitar when Gramps comes in and shows him how it's done.
I sing better in the spotlight. You rap me, it's fine, but get a load of me. Back in my day, we could really play. Do the grams, do the grams, do the grams. Wait, there's more. I may be old, but my feet are cold. Do the grams.
This is the first scene in the show and I have literally no idea what just happened. And that's after listening to Hammer spoil the entire plot of the episode, and the show's intro, filling up 3 novels worth of backstory. I don't know if it's bad writing or bad animation. I get that they're trying to show that Gramps is badass or something, but when his dance is 1 frame of animation that's flipped for the only other frame, it's kind of hard to get that idea. It doesn't feel like a cartoon, it feels like an animatic. Just a bunch of storyboards with audio played over it. I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually the case. On top of that, Ludwig is a useless character. He doesn't need to be here. In fact, I don't know why he is. A fire truck goes speeding by, rendering this entire scene pointless.
No time for dancing, Gramps. We gotta move. The library's burning up.
How do you know that? All we saw is a fire truck heading somewhere in a very large city. How does she know that it's specifically the library on fire? Unless she was the one who set up the fire herself. I think that doing graffiti just might be a step down for her. Gramps and his granddaughter stand there and watch the library burn. Ludwig is also there, but once again, he's totally pointless as a character and doesn't have a reason to exist. What? Are these seriously your idea of background characters? What the hell? Then we see some flames dancing across the pole. Is this choppy animation bothering anyone else or just me? I'm sorry, this just really cracks me up. I find this absurd monument to laziness just humorous. The entire crowd only has 1 frame of animation as they point up to the sky. And then, if that wasn't lazy enough, they reused the exact same clip. It's just, how do you think that this is okay? And then Hammerman comes on the scene.
Stop! Hamilton!
Hey, he said the line! Can I go home now? He parachutes down to save the librarian, and then uses his musical notes to get to the ground. And then an umpire comes by to say that he's safe, while his teeth sparkle. That's some good egomania right there. Then he dances so much that a water tower comes to life and puts out the fire. So, Hammerman's powers are parachuting and falling down slowly. Okay, I get that, he's famous for wearing parachute pants. Then he could summon musical notes to write on like a discount Frozone. Alright, still on board, he is a musician. Then he can create life. Right, this is probably the fatal flaw with Hammerman's writing. Hammerman's powers could do pretty much anything that the writers want. Not only does that make tension an impossibility, but it just makes Hammerman uninteresting. If superheroes are all powerful, they need to have some kind of weakness. Imagine if Superman wasn't weak to kryptonite. As far as I can tell though, Hammerman doesn't have a kryptonite. Except the off button on the remote control in the passage of time, I guess. Also, they keep writing sound effects in the episode, even though what happens here doesn't really strike me as a splush sound effect. Then Graham's granddaughter tries to talk to Hammerman, but he gets away before she has a chance and wait, what? You know that intro that takes forever? Yeah, it said that Gramps and his granddaughter went on the road to find someone who was worthy of the load to... Who the fuck wrote these lyrics? The point is that according to the intro, the granddaughter knows about the magical shoes that turn someone into a superhero. Her grandfather was that superhero. She went with him to find the successor to her grandfather and found him with her grandfather. And yet she doesn't know that Hammerman is Stanley. Okay? So not only does the theme song go on forever, it also gives incorrect information about the show itself. What the hell is this? And we're not even on the main graffiti plot yet. Also, the magical shoes are anthropomorphic to be annoying. Stanley isn't sure that he wants to be a superhero because he's all humble and stuff, and too good for this world, and doesn't think he can handle the responsibility and eat me. The show is like 99% of celebrity-based cartoons, nothing more than an ego trip. And this humble brag is kind of insulting. Meanwhile, at the rec center, the granddaughter of Jody is painting when a pipe bursts and destroys her painting. Some guy comes in named Showbiz. His gimmick is that he has tons of get-rich-quick schemes, and is another useless character who adds nothing to the show. The important part is that no one seems to be paying attention to Jody's painting, or to her, even though the pipes burst in this very popular rec center, and she could see that. And Jody actually comes across as quite selfish here for that. She ends up leaving and she runs into a guy named Joker. Yeah, I wish. No, he's just some Nelson wannabe who's been graffitiing everywhere. Meanwhile, a creepy stalker is watching them from the sewers, and the show got some very dark undertones very quickly.
That little graffiti sweetie is exactly what I, Defacely Marmeister, have been looking for.
Wait, what? Why? If I'm not mistaken, this guy was watching Joker graffiti up the walls. And this might sound like a moot point, but Joker's graffiti comes alive towards the end of the episode, and we don't see Jody immediately, make a monster or anything. She just makes flames and... What the fuck? Who thought that this crazy lip syncing was acceptable? It looks like he's suffering from an allergic reaction or something.
I'm a scat man.
Anyway, he wants to use Jody specifically to do this because I don't know, because it's never explained. Stanley and Gramps talk for a while about Jody.
Now I know life's been real hard on her. Well, with having no parents. Spending all that time traveling around with me, looking for the right person to wed and choose.
Oh, okay. So it's not just the introduction to the show that said Jody was with Gramps looking for someone to wear the magical shoes and found Stanley, and yet doesn't know that Stanley wears the magical shoes. Also, for some reason, Showbiz wants Stanley to play the tuba. The villain comes to Jody and gives her paint for free and says that he wants her to paint the entire town.
While this marvelous design of yours could turn every bank wall...
It's okay, I guess. I like this guy's plan. He wants to rob banks and stores. To do this, instead of robbing banks and stores, with like guns or something, he gives a random girl that he has no idea anything about magical paints because he saw her make something one time, despite being able to make all graffiti come to life, and his story is that he's working for the mayor. But Jody goes along with this because, as established, she's stupid. And despite needing Jody specifically for some reason, it's perfectly okay for all of the other kids to come in and graffiti things too. What did he specifically see in Jody again? Alright, she's stupid, because the show thinks all kids are stupid. The bad guy sprays over Jody's design and makes a monster come to life. Okay, why the hell didn't he make these things himself? If his evil powers to bring graffiti to life, you'd think that he'd, try to make some of his own graffiti? I'm not asking for much. Maybe just a scene to establish that he's a shit artist. Maybe show him animating a scene from Hammerman. That's all I want. We cut to the magical shoes who are alive and playing cards, and are another one of a million characters in the show trying to play the comic relief. Meanwhile, Showbiz tries to get Ludwig to play the tuba, and there's something about food. What's important is that this bag gets replaced by Stanley's, and I just love how forceful this is. Showbiz just takes Stanley's bag and tosses it into the corner. No reason, just does it. Without the magical shoes, he can't turn into Hammerman. I mean, it's a start towards a weakness, I guess. But if he's so incredibly awesome and invulnerable, why does he ever take the shoes off? Ever. Also, if the shoes can move around and talk, you'd think that it'd be obvious that Stanley didn't have the right bag, right?
Huh? This is baloney.
He said it, not me. What happens next? How do I even begin to describe it? Stanley goes to the bad guy and asks for change for $1. Then the bad guy gives it to him, and Stanley tries to call the police at a payphone right in front of the bad guy.
Hello? Police? Yo, get over here quick. Yeah, there's a guy trying to rob the entire city. You got to stop him. He's bringing all the graffiti to life.
Let me guess, Prince Albert is in a can too, dumbass. Look, we have a lot of work to do, and it's not easy when we only have 2 frames of animation.
Marmeister, you're just doing this because you had an unhappy childhood.
Let me guess, was he forced to watch shows like Hammerman? Anyway, Stanley gets sprayed with a magical spray paint that makes the next few frames even cheaper to produce. Then all of the graffiti comes to life. Hey, it was just like Hammer said. Guy must be a prophet or something.
Whoa! That's Joker's tag! That Moormeister conned me.
Giant graffiti comes to life, breaks the building, and steals loot. And your first reaction is, oh, I've been tricked. Granted, that might be our reaction eventually, but the first reaction is usually surprise. Something like, oh my god, what's that? And graffiti has come to life, and is it going to hurt me? Perhaps I should hide. Trust me, I know this from experience. Jody comes to her grandfather and tries to fly. And for some reason, Grandpa too wants to keep Hammerman's identity a secret, despite the fact that he took her away from any life that she had to find the new owner of the magical shoes, and the fact that they settled down right after they met this guy named Stanley. And why the fuck doesn't she know who Hammerman is? It's not a rule that superheroes need a secret identity, and even beyond that, I think that she's in the position to have the privilege to know. Stanley starts singing a painful rendition of Graham's song, and that helps the others find him. Jody throws water on the fire monster, and then the monster that doesn't talk because it can't talk says I'm melting with no lip syncing in the time when it should have even less ability to talk. Then contrived convenience, and Stanley is free and not paint anymore. Anyway, Stanley replaces the bags, and then the fire walks in. And how badly it's animated just cracks me up. It's like a little kid waving something in front of a camera. And it's kind of cute in a way. Then Stanley becomes Hammerman and Can't Touch This starts playing during the fight scene. But I can't play it for you because copyright, so we're just gonna have to fast forward to when it's over. I can't even play the Weird Al parody, which is oddly very appropriate for this show. I will say that one lyric stands out painfully well though. Either work hard or you may as well quit. Once again, it's cute. Because Jody is stupid, she walks up to the bad guy and he holds her hostage.
If you don't go away right now, I'll turn this little artsy smartsy into an art display on the wall forever!
Anyone else getting an urge to play A Link Between Worlds again? Jody dresses up a police officer and he arrests the bad guy, despite the fact that Jody was the one who committed a crime in his line of sight. But I guess the moral of this episode is that sometimes the graffiti is a good thing and it can save the day. Hammerman also learns a lesson, that he shouldn't care about a rec center flooding due to broken pipes. You know, a rec center that a lot of kids seem to care about. A rec center that he, in his own words, said that if it wasn't open, then those kids wouldn't be able to eat lunch.
Saving the library with superpowers is one thing, but some kids at the rec center don't even get lunch unless we're open to feed them.
But no, complimenting Jody on one specific painting is more important than all of that, even though she seems to have an artist friend who usually paid attention to her and her paintings, and she had to temporarily stop being paid attention to because of the plumbing. Plumbing that Jody herself could see was destroyed, and it inconvenienced her personally. It's bad, but it's better than Hammer's moral.
So next time you feel like doing a little artwork, do it on some paper, not on somebody else's property. It'll keep you out of a whole lot of trouble. And who knows, you might end up drawing on a cartoon like Hammerman one day.
Yeah, I'm sure that set a lot of kids straight. Makes me consider tagging up someplace right now. Not to mention that Don't Graffiti is one of the most confusing first morals of any show that I've ever seen. I don't really think that a lot of kids consider tagging up a city. If I'm not mistaken, that's more of a teenager thing. And it's usually due to claiming territory for gangs. And if a kid is in a gang, I don't think the morals of Hammerman is really gonna set them straight. Back to the Fat Albert comparison. Their first moral was about lying to parents, which was more applicable to the target audience and much more universal. But it's not like anyone took any of this seriously. Back in the 90s, Hammer had a very famous album that sold 10 million units. He had 3 #1 songs, and it must have been a quick no-brainer choice to make a show like this. So quick and such a no-brainer that they made the show quickly with no brains. Then something happened that always does. The star fell, fashions changed, and time moved on. And when you're one of the acts that defines a part of the decade, it's really hard to change with the times. As for Hammerman the show, I don't know what else to say. Nowadays, animation is very mainstream, but back when this was made, and when most of these celebrity-based cartoons exist, it was seen as kid stuff, nothing more, and treated like it. I bring that up because it's clear that none of these celebrities had seen a cartoon in at least 20 years. This one is a very generic superhero story, and I'll bet that Hammer didn't read comics either. They didn't watch cartoons, and they definitely didn't think that they could do anything good with the medium. That being said, I think this is one of the things that we're doing better now than we did in the 90s. The 2000s gave us shows like Jackie Chan Adventures and Class of 3000. While they aren't the greatest things in the world, they're very enjoyable, and they actually seem to want to exist beyond selling a brand. This decade we had Mike Tyson Mysteries, which took the piss out of this kind of schlock. But for a celebrity-based cartoon to truly be great, it needs something special. The celebrity in question needs to have passion for the art form, and they need to care about entertaining their audience, no matter what the medium. In fact, the best possible celebrity-based cartoon wouldn't even bring attention to the fact that it's a celebrity-based cartoon.
Today is gonna be exceptional. Never boring even for a minute. It's my world and we're all living in it.
Oh yeah, well, I'll get to that later this year. Right now, we're in the middle of a 90s marathon, and we're just getting started, so stay tuned.